Peace, 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 y'all. Thank you for tuning in. It's a very, very special occasion here. We have a powerful panel and discussion prepared for you guys. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, just depending on where you guys are at in the world. Definitely thank you for joining us for this critical conversation beyond Cop Cities and Ultra-Counterinsurgency. This has been brought to you by Black Power Media. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the YouTube channel. Make sure you check out the website, blackpowermedia.org. Make sure you check out the Patreon and just continue to support everything that we're doing. We appreciate you guys for showing up to this important conversation. This affects us all. So it's definitely important. It's going to be powerful. It's going to be educational. We will be examining the evolving landscape of policing, surveillance, and social control. We have a powerful panel of guests here. We have Kiana Jones Moore, we have Kalonji Changa, we have Dr. Miron Clay-Gilmore, and we have Dr. Joy James. So definitely stay tuned. It's going to be very powerful. As you know, in recent years, much attention has been focused on projects like Cop City, symbols of an increasingly militarized approach to domestic policing. But today we're going to kind of look beyond just a single paradigm to understand the broader, more complex ecosystem of ultra counterinsurgency. This includes not just police departments, but surveillance technologies, public and private partnerships, and policies designed to manage, contain, and discipline communities, especially our communities, Black and Brown and working class. Before we dive in, I will just kind of give you guys uh, uh, share with you guys how this will work. And so a quick overview each speaker will have about 15 minutes to share their insights. And after all the presentations, we'll open it up for a roundtable discussion. Make sure you guys in the audience, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll be looking at the chat. I might not be able to get to all of the questions, but if you have any questions and you want to ask something to one of the panelists, just put it in the chat and I'll take note. And if we can get to it in the roundtable discussion, we most definitely will. And so let me bring in the first speaker, which is powerful, powerful, powerful sister, Kiana Jones Moore, a faith leader, political activist, community organizer based in Atlanta. She is a dedicated advocate for equality, affordable childcare, educational equity, and environmental justice. Kiana has also been a leading voice in the movement to stop Cop City and recently spoke at the United Nations in Geneva about police violence in the US. As I told you, she's very, very powerful. Her work bridges grassroots activism with faith-based organizing to empower and uplift the Black community. She is also a member of the Black Power Media family. You can catch her in the mornings on the Rise Up International Morning Show. Kiana Jones Moore, thank you for everything that you do. And come on up, it's your time to present.
Thank you so much, Brother Rakeem. Thank you to Kalonji and Black Power Media. So glad to be here with Dr. Joy and Dr. Miron Gilmore. Y'all, we are in an unprecedented, oh, wait a minute, let me not even say unprecedented. We are just in a moment right now, because honestly, we've seen this before. And I just got home from my own radio show here in Atlanta. I'm on local radio. And today I actually talked about the moment that we're in and the fact that we've seen this before. And we're talking about counterinsurgency and beyond Cop Cities. And this is ultra counterinsurgency. And what I have to say is that in the movement to stop Cop City, we made a lot of connections. We did our very best to help people understand what counterinsurgency is. And I will say that we told you so, because everything that we talked about, everything that we highlighted within the movement, we see now. So how did we get here? I'll start with Cop City here in the city of Atlanta, because Cop City mirrors what was going on not so long ago in this nation's history. So 2020, we had the murder of George Floyd for the world to see. We had the murder of Breonna Taylor. We had so many police murders of civilians leading up to the murder of George Floyd. So many cries from the community that went unheard. But when George Floyd was murdered, when Breonna Taylor was murdered, when Botham Jean was murdered, there were outcries like never before. When Michael Brown was murdered, we saw the birth of the Black Lives Matter movement, and we saw what was going on in this country at that time. People were getting sick and tired of being sick and tired of police terror. So when the murder of George Floyd happened for the world to see, and we all stood up, the majority of us anyway, stood up, things began to shift in the atmosphere of organizing, activism, and also government monitoring. When George Floyd was murdered and Breonna Taylor was murdered, we also had here in the city of Atlanta a young man by the name of Rayshard Brooks, who was murdered for simply sleeping in his car at a Wendy's. And when the community learned of Rayshard Brooks's death, the community here decided to show up and show out as well. People went so far as to stage protests more than 30 days straight. People were protesting about the murder of Rayshard Brooks. This is around the same time that Ahmaud Arbery gets murdered, not by police, but due to white supremacy. So in the city of Atlanta in particular, there is unrest, and people have said no more. Because people decided to come together in community, to show up for each other the way that no government agency would, the way that no 501c3 organization would, because the community came together to say, we're not going to allow you to keep killing us and we don't get justice, because the community came together to say, we are going to create a liberated zone where y'all murdered this person, and we even want to turn the site of a lynching into the Rayshard Brooks Peace Center. Because the community decided to do that, the powers that be were not happy, because you had white people in Buckhead, which is a suburb of Atlanta. You had white people in Buckhead who were saying, oh no, they out of control. These black people can't bring this stuff over here. Y'all better do something. The white people in Buckhead were so shook that they decided that they were going to put together a plan to secede from the city of Atlanta. And that would mean that they would take with them a substantial amount of the tax base of the city of Atlanta. At the time, Keisha Lance Bottoms was the mayor, Andre Dickens was on council, and there was a council person by the name of Joyce Shepard who decided that it would be a great idea to appease the people in Buckhead by saying, hey, don't worry about it. We are in the Black Miss Leadership class. We understand what our role is. We are the good Negroes, and we know that we got to keep them other Negroes from coming into Buckhead. We know it's our position to subdue them with appearances. So let us continue to sit in a place of appearing to be here for the benefit of Black people, because for some, representation is enough. But while we are here, we're going to put together a plan for a state-of-the-art militarized police training facility where we will be able to put down those protests. What you saw in these streets, because of Rayshard Brooks, you'll never see again, because we are going to give you Cop City. And what Cop City represents is the level of counterinsurgency where we are right now in this country. Cop City represents a level of state repression that people thought was impossible. But Cop City also mirrors what happened in this country in the 60s when there was widespread protest, particularly led by students on college campuses. Does any of this sound familiar? And then the next thing you know, you have schools of the Americas popping up where the U.S. military was doing just what Cop City is intended to do: train local police departments to put down specifically protest movements. Now, Cop City in Atlanta is a huge symbol of repression because they have taken a historically Black neighborhood that housed the South River Forest, which used to be the largest urban forest in the southeastern United States. No longer is it that, because those 381 acres of trees have been razed to the ground to build Cop City. The original plans for Cop City included a Black Hawk helicopter landing pad, as well as a mock city for quote unquote urban warfare. It also included a burn tower because they said that this was going to be, a state-of-the-art public safety training facility because, cops, firefighters, they go together. So let's just put it all in one place. And let's put these mock buildings in here. Let's build a fake city while you have an entire city that is plagued by unhoused people, like the issue of unhoused people. Let's not provide real housing for them, but let's create fake apartment buildings and fake hotels for us to practice scaling these buildings, bombing these buildings, going into these buildings. Let's practice our urban warfare here. And it even goes back as far as the Georgia International Law Exchange Program that takes officers from all over this country to Israel to train with the Israeli occupation forces in counterinsurgency. So many tactics that we see the police departments employing, particularly here in Georgia, they're learned from the Israeli occupation forces. The same way that Israel incessantly surveils Gaza is the same way that Atlanta has become, because a former police chief went on one of those Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange trips and was so impressed by the surveillance of the Palestinians that he thought Atlanta should be surveilled the same way. So much so that Atlanta has now become the most surveilled city per capita within these yet to be United States. And off of that, building on it, tactics that are practiced by the Israeli occupation forces are now put into practice daily by the Atlanta Police Department. We saw this at Emory University when they kettled protesters who were simply there doing nothing but raising their voices. We saw this at different events during weeks of action back in 2022 when people were, at a music festival. We saw the kettling techniques. We saw the suppression techniques that are used by the Israelis being employed by the city of Atlanta, the Georgia State Patrol, other agencies who have benefited from their training. Why is Cop City important? Cop City is important because we knew here in the city of Atlanta that if this Cop City were to be built, that it would spread like wildfire. Not so much as the structure, but the sentiment of having to put down protests, because this government has been increasingly moving in a direction that criminalizes dissent, where you are criminalized for thinking outside of what the powers that be put forth, where you are criminalized for wanting freedom and justice, where you are criminalized and you are labeled as a terrorist because you believe that apartheid is wrong, because you don't believe that genocide should be tolerated, and you dare to say as much. So when Cop City was thought of, Cop City was thought of with the intention of discouraging dissent. Cop City was thought of with the intention of intimidating the community. Why else would you put a militarized police training facility in the heart of a Black neighborhood? A neighborhood where I grew up, where most of my relatives went to the local high school that's a stone's throw away from Cop City. Why else would it be imperative to have this type of training facility in the heart of the city? Well, it is because if that training facility is there, then there's a level of intimidation that would cause people and their opinions to not only stay away from Buckhead, but it contributes to the ongoing growth of the prison industrial complex, because studies have shown that communities that are over-policed and under-resourced funnel into that prison industrial complex quite regularly. So now we're not talking about a school to prison pipeline. We are talking about a birth to prison pipeline, because from the time that Black children are born, they are not seen as innocent, the same as Palestinian children. We have now this mentality of law enforcement is needed. And where were we in the 60s when that mentality became pervasive? Why was it that the schools of the Americas popped up? It is because we were in a moment during that time when community said, we are going to take care of each other. We are going to resist all of your efforts to keep us subdued. We are going to resist at every turn because what you're doing is not right. And what did we see? We saw the FBI targeting the Black Panthers just because they wanted to feed people. We saw the Black Panthers being targeted because they were doing political education, helping people to become civically engaged where they were, helping people to understand what their votes mean and how to withhold their vote to get what they want. And what we see with Cop City now is that this again is intended to discourage any of that organizing. They don't want us in the street telling people that we don't have to depend on the government to feed us. They don't want us in the street telling people that we don't need cops, we police ourselves. Because whoever told you that you needed policing, these are slave catchers. This country's unhealthy obsession with chattel slavery fuels inceptions like Cop City. But the community stood up against Cop City. In 2021, community members showed up for 17 hours of public comment via Zoom when they heard about Cop City being proposed. Despite community outcry, the Atlanta City Council moved forward with this plan to allow the Atlanta Police Foundation to lease land that is situated in the heart of DeKalb County. That's not even the city of Atlanta's to begin with, but a land swap happened. They wanted to move forward, but the community started to resist. We canvassed, we did teach-ins, we held protests, we did weeks of action. In June of 2022, we packed out Atlanta City Hall. And we stayed there until 6 a.m. the next morning because we gave then more than 17 hours of public comment. The community showed up in an unprecedented way, only to have the City of Atlanta City Council still give us their asses to kiss and say that they didn't care what the community wanted. So we decided then that we would try another way. We decided to go the electoral politics route, and we tried for a ballot referendum. Still, even doing it the so-called right way, right? Mayor Andre Dickens sought to suppress our voices. We are still in court around that referendum case. But I said that just to say that when the community showed up in a revolutionary way, for all of those naysayers who said, oh, they'll never get anywhere because they're not doing it the right way, we did do it the so-called right way. And what did it yield us? Counterinsurgency was still there. Counterinsurgency is all of the tactics that are used to stop the movement of so-called, I guess, unsanctioned organizing forces, because, you know, we're not the NAACP. So we're not going to move the way they do. But the NAACP also is not going to have to deal with counterinsurgency the way we will, because the NAACP fits within the fabric of what this country is. But any type of movement that is revolutionary, any type of movement that is seen as radical will suffer counterinsurgency. And the things that we're seeing today that are happening with this government, all of these things are happening because people dared to resist something like Cop City when we said, hey, if we don't stop this now, it's going to spread. What we see now is that there are over 50 Cop Cities prescribed and being planned in other parts of this country. When we said this mirrors what's going on in Palestine, we are no different than Palestinians. We've seen things there escalate to where they are now. And you can still draw the parallel. But the fact that people woke up to that is the reason why Cop Cities came into being. The fact that people woke up to it and decided that they were no longer going to take it is why we are where we are now. So you have Cop City here in Atlanta. You have Cop Cities being proposed in other places in this country. And now you have the arrest of people simply because they say free Palestine. You have people being detained in an airport, having their laptops and phones confiscated because they have talked about solidarity, alternative economic systems. They have talked about resisting genocide. They have talked about stopping Cop Cities. And all of those things now are dangerous words. All of those things now get you considered as a terrorist. All of those things, if you are not so-called legally in this country, will get you deported. This is where we are. This is why Cop City is important. And this was also the reason why they need Cop Cities, because for all of the unrest that is happening, right? We're seeing the tip of the iceberg now. It's going to get thicker than this, but they want Cop Cities because they think that Cop Cities will contain revolution.
Thank you, Kiana Jones Moore, everybody. We appreciate that powerful bill, that powerful message. Again, thank you for all that you do and your wisdom on this topic. Guys, remember, make sure you are subscribed to Black Power Media on YouTube. Make sure you check out the Patreon at Black Power Media Reloaded. You can also support the Cash App at BPM Reloaded. And if you have any questions, make sure you ask those questions in the chat. I am keeping my eye on the chat. If you have anything that you want to ask the panelists, please let me know. Again, thank you, Kiana Jones Moore, for all you do. Now we will be pulling up Dr. Gilmore, who's another powerful speaker, another powerful brother. He holds a PhD in philosophy from the University of Edinburgh, where he made history as the first Black philosopher to earn this degree. Dr. Clay-Gilmore's research focuses on Africana philosophy, anti-colonial theory, Black male studies, and the ethics of artificial intelligence. He explores the role of technologies like AI, drones, and predictive analytics in state repression and counterinsurgency, drawing from the works of figures like Huey, Frantz Fanon, Du Bois, and countless others. He is also a newest member of the Black Power Media family, as me and him will be having a show coming soon on Black Power Media. If you guys want to get more familiar with his work, all you got to do is Google him. Papers like Killology and countless others are out there. Very powerful. Dr. Clay-Gilmore, thank you for coming. The floor is yours, brother.
Hey, thanks for that introduction. And, it's a pleasure to be here with you all. I really enjoyed the last comments. And it was something that the last speaker said that I think is a great segue. She started off with saying that this is not new. And, it was a very true statement. And I really want to try to, contribute by clarifying the colonial roots of counterinsurgency. We talk about it today. It seems as if it's a stable concept. But actually, the first formulation of counterinsurgency was something called savage warfare or uncivilized warfare. And you see this really emerge in the 18th century as a doctrine. But unofficially, you see it going back to the earliest colonization of the Western Hemisphere and chattel slavery in the Americas. And this was grounded on this idea that non-white peoples and non-Western populations are particularly savage and uncivilized. And this lack of civilization meant that Western or white populations had to war against them using unique measures that were far more barbaric than what you would find in wars against one another. But what's important to remember about this, and I think it's a good continuity all the way to its invention as counterinsurgency, is that it's really characterized by this paradoxical unity between development or assimilation and brute force, brute militarism. right? The rawest tactics you can think of to kill targets of the group. Now, in 1974, Huey P. Newton has this theory of empire that says that, look, the United States rules the world not only based on its accomplishment in military technology, but also around what he calls this unprecedented concept of counterinsurgency. And I think Huey was right that this concept was unprecedented, because what's unprecedented about it is that it's actually a creation of the 1960s, right? It's actually a creation of the Kennedy administration. Before, as I was trying to explain earlier, right, it's called savage warfare, right? Savage warfare, not counterinsurgency. Its creation into counterinsurgency actually speaks to the accomplishment of the United States in an epistemological way, or as it relates to knowledge, right? That the United States actually created a breakthrough. What they did is recruit the best counterinsurgents you can find from France, the best from Britain, the best from other parts of the UK, Australia, right? And then they created think tanks and developed this idea of counterinsurgency. But one thing that sticks through all the way through counterinsurgency is what I've called in my work an androcentric pattern of target acquisition, right? So you see this not only in foreign wars by Western populations, but also against the wars against Black America, right? The rates of lynching, the rates of, or the tactics of social engineering used during slavery. They're very focused on subduing males by force. And you see this if you look at some of the publicly available information with the Atlanta Police Department themselves as relics of a chattel enslavement system, as the evolution of a chattel enslavement system. The biggest database on killings, police killings, is Mapping the Violence with Washington Post. And if you look at Atlanta PD from 2013 to 2025, they killed 36 people. Now, 86% of these victims, or 31, were Black people, right? But when you split by sex and gender, what you find is that 31 out of 31 of the victims were Black male victims, right? Now, we should expect this if we understand modern counterinsurgency and its target of a criminal or a terrorist to be a basic evolution of the target of savages, right? In ethnological and Western historical thought, you see this type of androcentricity, Savages have a nomenclature in anthropological literature. They're dark, they're men, they're stupid or brutish, and they're tyrannical toward women, right? This is the consensus about the nature of the savage male up until the mid-20th century. And what you see with the emergence of counterinsurgency is the articulation and the emergence of a new grammar, right, to sort the battle space and to understand populations is to acquire targets among them. And that new grammar turns on terms like criminal or terrorist, right? But we see the same type of dynamics. And I think, Cop City is not only an exemplification of this, but actually the Atlanta Police Foundation tried to install basically an open air prison in Atlanta 2 years ago. So they had this $1 million contract for this company, Talatrix, right? And this technology was like basically using geofencing and proprietary algorithms so that security police agencies could track people who are on pretrial release or probation and follow them around the city, right? It would wire up the city. It proposed to link with another network of cameras. It was over 1,000 cameras throughout the city to watch these people for pattern of life analysis. That's what it's called, right? But this is actually a pattern of surveillance that's characteristic of the post 9/11 wars on terrorism that's being proposed to be applied to repeat offenders in Atlanta, right? So when you dig into the data and find out who are these repeat offenders, you have about 1,000 people, right? The test group, out of 1,000 people, 93% are Black people, about 934. And out of that 934, 880 are Black males, right? So, this is, I think what you find from Black male study scholars and really trying to explain the androcentric patterns of target acquisition. Because what you have is the entire Black population being subject to open air prison conditions as a result of the demonization of the males of the group, right? So what's at stake is what you get in this formula of counterinsurgency from the 1960s and Kennedy himself, is that the population itself is the victory. One thing that distinguishes counterinsurgencies from simplistic or conventional types of wars is that there is no big battle to end the counterinsurgency. It's an indeterminate type of endeavor, right? Empires assume these types of burdens because they want to socialize and assimilate a people and socially engineer a people in order to attain victory. And I think, that's, kind of where I want to end with us. I think with Black people, we need to learn how to think about victory in a different type of way and really consider the normative expectations of what will come with a revolt. If we really live in an empire that rules based off of military technology, what do we really expect from a revolt?
Peace, peace, peace. Thank you for that powerful bill, Dr. Gilmore, and we'll definitely get into that more during the roundtable discussion. Very important things that you were discussing, especially with technology and the idea of Atlanta being an open air prison, similar to what we see in Gaza, right? And we will begin later on in the roundtable discussion to kind of connect what happens internationally to what happens domestically, because it is all connected. And so thank you again for that powerful bill, brother. Now we have the great Dr. Joy James coming to the stage. She is a prominent scholar, professor known for her work in Black studies, political theory, social justice. Her research explores themes of resistance, state violence, and the intersection of race, gender, and power. Dr. James has authored numerous influential works, including her book Resisting State Violence, and she is one of the leading voices in the study of incarceration, Black feminism, and radical politics. I think most of us know who she is already. We all appreciate what she does. And so, Dr. James, again, thank you for coming. She is also a part of the Black Power Media family, but the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you all. And thanks so much for what people have already put on the table. You kind of set the table, right? The importance of community, and also this last question about revolt. I mean, what is the nature of rebellion against repression? And I think we're still sorting that out, and there's a lot of misdirection that's focused on that. But I want to talk briefly about some of the issues that I've been looking at lately in terms of the volumes that we've collectively done, like with Kalonji, with Reverend Keyanna, with folks here, beyond Cop Cities, and the forthcoming one, which is on counterinsurgency or confronting counterinsurgency. The subtitle talks about democracy's terrors, right? So it's a Trojan horse that we've inherited from the empire based on its genocidal violence against indigenous, its genocidal violence against people of African descent, and its genocidal violence against Palestinians and against clean water, clean air, clean earth. So I want to talk about a couple of documents that I've been looking at lately that are referenced in the two small, they're not even volumes, but they're organizing tools based on the work that all of you have been doing. So one is a 1988 discriminate deterrence manuscript that you can find online at the Air and Space Forces magazine. And there are different people who signed it. Samuel Huntington. These are all the players during the Cold War, right? 1988, before the Soviet Union collapses in about 1991. So the people that capture my attention would be Henry Kissinger, who's also known as a war criminal by some, given the violence and the genocides that happened in Southeast Asia when he was Secretary of State. And the other one would be Zbigniew Brzezinski, also Harvard trained. It was kind of a interesting line between imperialism and higher education. We're seeing how these elite schools are being bullied by the state, but there are also schools that have been complicit in policies, foreign policy and domestic policies that have destabilized what we would call a healthy democracy. So discriminate deterrence, when I, took a look at it decades ago and then kind of looked at it again today to be in this discussion tonight, discriminate deterrence is talking about counterinsurgency, not in the long view that Dr. Gilmore had put out, right? But in a shortened view of like how you could undermine or destabilize the liberation movements, that the so-called third world struggles that emerged after World War II. And in the text, it tells you what the future will be, which is a lot like the future of the past, like the Berlin Conference of 1886, the insanity of King Leopold, who wants rubber to be picked, but if you don't pick the quantity, the Africans in the Congo would have one hand chopped off, and if the next day they couldn't pick much, why would they be able to pick anything, right? The other, hand chopped off. So there's accumulation, but there's also terrorism built in to foreign policy. And I would echo what's already been said about cop cities and other machinations and war machines coming out of the state. Domestic U.S. policy is very much aligned with U.S. foreign policy, meaning capture, terror, violence is part of the structure and part of, not even part of, it's the machinery of the state. So in 1988, they're talking about the mass deaths in these wars will not be soldiers. It's not going to be like the wars of World War I, World War II, even though Civil War, which W.B. Du Bois points out in Black Reconstruction, that some 200,000 people of African descent fought in the Civil War, which is probably why the North won. But the Civil War is the bloodiest war the U.S. has ever been in, like 600,000 casualties, right? So these wars have all across the globe, interior, exterior to the US, they've all been racially driven, but there's been a mechanism that's been systematic. And so the terror that we're talking about, which we all know, has never been dissipated, has never been disappeared. It's taken on different lives, different life forms, and different mutations. So in this document, 1988, which is near the end of the Cold War, the president would be Ronald Reagan. He's going to bully or pressure the Soviets, who will give up through Gorbachev and dismantle the Soviet Union in 1991. And it's important about the Soviet world as the second world. The Western world, meaning Europe, the US, Canada, as the first world. The second world was stabilizing or assisting the liberation of the so-called third world, Africa, right, Caribbean, Latin America, Asia. And what is written in the text, with quite applause to themselves, with Kissinger and others, is that mass death, continuous war, seeking of occupations of lands where it could be mineral wealth, it could be strategic locations, that is the past, the present, and the future of the democracy. The second document, or the second incident that I want to piece together with these presidents, Ronald Reagan is not the first predatory president. Obviously, he's not the last. But again, this document is a military document, and it's sent out telling us what the 21st century would look like. And in the 21st century, we get the first Black president. And then there's a lot of celebration. And yes, I did vote for him, for Barama. Barack Obama. Under those conditions, we see the first time, in this century, that US citizens can be killed by drone strikes in other countries. And then here we're talking 2011 about Yemen. There's always been a precedent set from 9/11, right? When George Bush is president, when the towers come down, when Homeland Security becomes formed, when the whole draconian permanent war machine is cemented with the whole notion of countering terrorism. Under the Bush administration, there will be lies about weapons of mass destruction. In Iraq, there'll be hundreds of thousands of people dying there, as tens of thousands, not obviously more, are dying around the globe with these genocidal wars. But under this framework of Obama, and this is, I really want to go back to the issues that have been raised. What is community? Like, obviously, all Black people are not in community. And what does it mean to rebel against predatory warfare? And so with the Black president, it's hard to do that. The way in which he works and delivers AFRICOM, the way in which drone strikes are used, the way in which, again, US citizens can be terrorized, hunted, and killed by a drone strike, not just by the father who is a cleric, but also 2 weeks later, murder the 16-year-old who's coming back to high school in the US. And these are people who were born in the US. And so I want to end with this whole concept or notion of lack of safety because you're an American citizen. I mean, we can fast forward from George Bush and all the laws that would emerge around Homeland Security that made us less secure. We could move on to Obama, the first Black liberal president who worked for billionaire banking and also worked for Imperial War. Biden, it should be a blip because he's a knockoff of everything else, from reactionary to faux liberal, right? To the moment that we're looking now with the POTUS, I'm just going to call him POTUS, President of the United States, the situation where you can terrorize a population that goes beyond the terrorism levied against Black people, against Indigenous people, against radicals. You can leverage a proto-fascist state, which has been brought up before, a proto-fascist administration that follows a state with a long history of predatory behavior and genocide by deporting people first who don't have papers, whatever that means. I mean, this is all land that's been stolen from other people. But then you move on, and as the POTUS said yesterday when he was meeting with Bukele, Nayib, I believe Bukele is the name of the president of El Salvador, that there should be 5 more prisons built in El Salvador with CCOT, which is just a zone of torture known as a prison, that there should be 5 more prisons because we should be moving homegrown criminals. That's POTUS's language. I mean, he could have said the N-word in different ways, but homegrown criminals that should be offshored, which means that they should be deported to countries that we've never been in before. But the very concept of protest, the very concept of human rights, the very concept of constitutional law is obviously shattered. And it was shattered centuries before in terms of us. But the breakage now is stunningly apparent. And so I want to end. I have more questions, obviously no answers. But if the state has been engaged in predatory war for centuries and the building of empire, specifically after World War II, what constitutes community that would engage in an intellectual, spiritual, political rebellion? Because the stripping of our agency in our lives is the number one requirement of the state right now, or the demand that it's putting forward in order to function. So this is more than authoritarian. This is probably more than proto-fascist. This is probably fascist. But how we organize around that as people of African descent, how do we do that across the globe? That would be the lifeline. And people have already gestured to that lifeline and how to build it. And I'm just saying that I am very dedicated to learn more about how we proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Joy James. Very powerful build, as expected. Again, we appreciate all that you do. Now coming to the stage, we have Brother Kalonji Changa coming on, founder of Black Power Media, is also a nationally recognized community organizer, author, educator, dedicated to Black liberation and grassroots empowerment. He is the founder and national coordinator of the FTP movement, which has developed initiatives such as the International Feed the People, Siafu Youth Corps, Mama's Army, and the National Coalition to Combat Police Terrorism. Brother Kalonji, welcome to the stage.
Hey, thank you, brother. Can you hear me pretty good? I'm good.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Cool. Yes, man, it's so much. You know, I'm grateful to be in conversation with people I respect. And first off, let me say shout out to my brother Rakeem Shabazz, who is an excellent, powerful warrior himself. I appreciate his work. I appreciate his efforts. I appreciate his energy. I appreciate his being truthful and not being afraid to stand on the side of what's right. We're in a time right now where truth is hated, and not just amongst your quote unquote enemy, but amongst those who you might consider comrades, allies, or whatever the case is, because capitalism is a confusing situation. And capitalism is the enemy of truth. And when we talk about capitalism and we talk about colonialism and we talk about imperialism, you know, we have to keep in mind that it comes from a dark space. Now, some people may be confused and they might say, well, we need capital and all that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying the system of white hegemony. You know, it is a place where, it's a breeding ground for violence, for death, and counterinsurgency is all too necessary when it comes to, keeping the slaves in check. I want to thank Kiana Jones Moore for her work, in the streets of Atlanta and, abroad, but particularly around Cop Cities, because during the height of Cop City, there were certain people who you would see front and center, and some people you didn't see so much. But she was one of those people that you not only saw, but you felt the impact of her work. And for her to be on this platform, it is a blessing. I want to shout out Dr. Joy James, who has been, very inspirational as far as a quote unquote writing partner, and a comrade, one of the few people in the academy that I actually trust. Some people think that he has a problem with the universities and all that. I don't, not at all. I have a problem with BS, and that BS comes from all over the place. It comes from not only the quote unquote movement, the academy, and nonprofits, et cetera. It's just like, unfortunately, we know that the academy and the nonprofit industrial complex is also a place where counterinsurgency breeds and grows. I want to thank our brother Dr. Clay-Gilmore, one of the newest members to the Black Power Media family. The beauty of this particular platform right now is that all of these folks that you've seen today, they actually have shows or are part of shows here at Black Power Media. And so we're grateful for their sharpness and their precise and concise movement. I also want to thank Ward Churchill. He couldn't make it today. We got a message from his wife, Natsu, and shout out to Natsu and Ward earlier today saying that he was under the weather and he couldn't make it today. So hopefully we'll have him on at a later date. And we would suggest, if you are new to what counterinsurgency and COINTELPRO is, make sure you check out his books. He has a powerful piece on the COINTELPRO papers. Couple different pieces that I might not get the title right now, but just Google Ward Churchill. In fact, all the people on this platform, these are people that you should look into. Beyond Cop Cities and Ultra-Counterinsurgency. We heard a lot tonight, a lot of information, and I'm hoping that folks are able to rewind, and I hope that you see benefit in our efforts. This is our first webinar here at Black Power Media. Usually we have it just on the YouTube channel, but we notice that sometimes some folks in the chat want to teach more than they learn. So we decided that we'd try something new and something different today. The one thing I learned from my years in organizing is that the best teachers are better students. So the more that your time that you put in learning, the better you'll become, the stronger you become as a teacher. Some people want to be teachers just simply because of the fact that, they say they're the boss or they've been in it for a number of years or a certain amount of time. That means nothing in the real world. We talk about elders. If I call someone an elder, it's because they've earned it. It's not because, they just happen to be old, not because they're a certain age. We have fools right now. I'll be 55 in December, and there's a lot of fools around me that I imagine that years from now, some people may be looking at them as elders, but I'm here to tell you that we don't stand a chance with some of these folks. And that's just being straight up, because that's the reality of what we are doing and what the times we're living in. Again, I'm grateful for folks. I want to respect folks' time for even, coming through and rocking with us today. Our brother, Miron, Dr. Clay-Gilmore, he gave a excellent breakdown on roots of counterinsurgency. And of course, it's safe to say that when you talk about counterinsurgency, any nation, any intelligent nation will have some type of form of intelligence. Unfortunately, European empires, such as the United States, they use counterinsurgency as a tool to destroy, as a tool to control, a tool of domination. Looking back at some of the roots of modern counterinsurgency, like COINTELPRO, I can recall just learning from so many different elders and OGs who were victims. We say that a revolutionary is never a victim, but some of these folks were victims of counterinsurgency, and some are still victims of counterinsurgency. I'm reminded in the chat, and shout out to our good brother Shep, about some of the folks who are political prisoners currently. Folks like Kamal Siddiqui, folks like Fred Burton and Joseph Bowen and so many others. Reverend Joy Powell, Mumia, Imam Jamil Alameen, who was just recently given a death sentence. 10 months to live is what they gave one of our leaders, because we believe that they gave him cancer. like so many of our other freedom fighters, we're noticing so many of our brothers and sisters who are dying from some form of cancer. And we don't think it's a coincidence, but nevertheless, I'm not going to get into all of that right now. But I want to look back at some of the early stages of COINTELPRO. But I want to start off with a quote from that was from April 3rd, 1968, a communique that was sent by the San Francisco FBI field office to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. And I want to mention that it was April 3rd, which was one day before the assassination of Dr. King, which took place in Memphis a day later. But that quote was, the Negro youth and moderates must be made to understand that if they succumb to revolutionary teachings, they will be dead revolutionaries. This is something that was written 57 years ago. And it's something that still stands today. I think that when we talk about counterinsurgency and we talk about COINTELPRO, we look at it like it's a thing of the past. Again, in my intro, I mentioned we have this whole nonprofit industrial complex. We have everything, so many different new age and new waves tactics right now. And everything from a simple podcast to what's being taught in these universities. Counterinsurgency is rampant. We're living in a great time. And some people are talking about, well, what about the Orange Man? And what about all that, he's canceling this and he's, I was telling some folks yesterday that for many of us, we were like the preacher on the corner saying that the world was about to end. He was on the corner and folks was looking at us like, they're losing their minds and nothing's going to happen. But now you get to see in real time, you get to see genocide in real time. You get to see, murders abroad. You get to see political assassinations, so on and so forth in real time. So a lot of what we talked about 30, 40 years ago, you get to visualize it and live it in real time. In thinking about COINTELPRO, we cannot forget the criminal acts and works of one J. Edgar Hoover. And when you talk about J. Edgar Hoover, his reign of terror still rules today. Still rules today. We're talking about a man who declared war not on the quote unquote Communist Party, but on every Black leader in every Black organization in the United States in the 20th century. And that would be anything from a Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey to Dr. King to the Black Panther Party, to the BLA and so on and so forth. RAM, Revolutionary Action Movement, SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and so many others. Again, I say that reign of terror still rules today because it was 100 years ago that that this criminal began his career in terror. Actually, it was 1917 when his uncle helped him to get a job at the Justice Department. And he started off, one of his first jobs was working with Senator Palmer at the time. And, excuse me, not Senator Palmer, Attorney General Alexander Mitchell Palmer, who organized the General Intelligence Unit. And he recruited Hoover back then. And it was in 1924 when J. Edgar Hoover ran or began to lead this General Intelligence Unit, which later on became what is known as the FBI. I'm looking at where we are now, and to a great extent, sometimes I don't know if I want to scream, holler, cry, or fight like hell. But I think sometimes it's a combination of all the above, because we're in a situation where we have elders, we have youth, and the fight oftentimes it's not for liberation. The fight is for recognition. We're living in times where counterinsurgency has heaped such hellish coal fire upon us that they have us confused. And it becomes more about personalities over progress. We're living in a time where folks equate movement to a conference or to a number of YouTube likes. It is sickening. We're at war. But for many of us, it's not a war, it's a massacre. Because we're confused. And we think that we're actually thinking. We think that we're thinking. And so because many of us don't have solutions to these problems, we think that a good quote, a tweet, or a nice program will suffice. There are no neutrals in war. And as one of our OGs often say, we have to get on the right side of the barricades. And sometimes I feel like we stumble to the wrong side based on ego. Now I know that this program tonight, it's about Cop Cities and Ultra-Counterinsurgency, and we're going to have a discussion after I finish rapping, but I've been compelled and I've been inspired to speak on some of the ills of what we call organizing right now. There's no true left right now. Not in the United States. In fact, we're living in a situation where people are caught up in debates, petty beefs, and all types of BS. Now, I don't think it's happenstance. I don't think it's just ego, but I know that the state will capitalize off of your ego. The state will capitalize off of your inadequacies and have you choosing sides over which personality you like the most. So I don't like him because he said this, or I don't like her because she dresses like this, and this one is FBA and all this other bullshit. I don't care if you FBA, I'm concerned about you being FBI. We get caught up in BS. We want to know what a person's gender is. We got gender beefs. I don't care about your gender. I'm concerned about your agenda. Where do we go from here? Right now, we headed to hell in a handbasket. We haven't learned anything from counterinsurgency. We haven't learned anything from COINTELPRO. Our comrade and OG, Jalil Muntaqim, wrote a book called We Are Our Own Liberators. And he's a brother that I love and I respect. I'm not going to be like the Negroes and say we're our own enemies. But we're looking the part. We're playing it a little bit right now. If you can hear my voice, if you can see my face, I pray that you feel my sincerity. I pray that you feel our sincerity. The reason why Black Power Media exists is because of the fact that we want to make sure that our people are being politicized. We want to give, as our brother Mumia talks about, voice to the voiceless. We want to give everyone, and even if you're on the right side of things and you think you have a plan of action, or if you do have a plan of action, we want to give you some play. We want to say, okay, boom, let's get together and let's have a political education class that goes beyond, the 2-3 members we have in our organizations, because nowadays everybody got a damn organization. There's 1,000 organizations in Atlanta alone, and they still building Cop City. 1,000 organizations. You got over 900 something military bases across the United States. Excuse me, across the world. Over 900 military bases. You have millions of quote unquote prisoners here in the United States. We live in a place that we often talk about as 5% of the world population, yet controls 25% of all resources. We live in a place where we talk about as 5% of the world population, yet controls or houses 25% of all inmates on this planet. We look at the US, we look at Israel, 2 criminal colonies. And we're being slaughtered. And while we're being slaughtered, we're arguing and debating. Now, I'm not one of those people that get on and talk about what we're not doing and all of that. All I know that from where I stand and where I'm sitting right now, I know that you better be prepared. You damn sure better be prepared. And if you're not being prepared, or if you're not prepared, you better be getting prepared. Just being tough ain't gonna cut it. Imam Jamil Alameen, formerly H. Rap Brown, said, everybody could fight, but everybody can't win. If you can't beat yourself, you can't beat nobody else. Everybody want to be a leader. Only the confused want to be leaders. Because if you knew what it took to lead, it's like what Malcolm talked about, revolution. You'll get out the alley. We're in crucial times. And it's not just because we got a white boy or a couple white boys running this particular empire. But those of us who study history, we know that all empires fall. What I'm here to say to you today is don't get caught up under the rubble. Because some of you are counter-revolutionary and anti-revolutionary just based off of your actions. Again, I'm not here to preach to you. I'm not here to lecture you. I'm just saying that, as the brothers and sisters say on my block, we fucking up. Straight up and down, we are fucking up. Because we're still pretending. It's like we're playing revolution. Leonard Peltier was just released, and he's not even totally released because he's on house arrest. February, after 49 years. You look at folks like Jalil that did 50 years. You look at Rochelle McGee, 67 years in prison. And we out here talking about putting together some conferences and shit. I like conferences. I like going to a conference, but we need plans of action right now. It's cool to be in fellowship. It's cool to be in community and all of that. That's great. But if your conference ain't teaching you how to survive, then it's useless. It's toilet paper. If you're not training your troops and your cadre, you're wasting time. The preacher used to say it's getting late in the evening. He said it's getting late in the evening. And I believe him. So I know I might have gotten off track a little bit, but I'm in serious pain right now because over the past year or two alone, I've watched so many of my elders become ancestors. From the Sekou Dingers to Jazz Hayden to Bilal Sunni Ali to our brother Masai Ehosi and so many others. I was telling some folks the other day, I have more ancestors than I have elders at this point. And I'm just talking about immediate ancestors. So before we make our way towards the ancestor realm, I pray that we practice some functional unity. Malcolm said, you go in the closet and you put your religion on the shelf and you come out swinging. I say you go in the closet, put your ego on the shelf. It's bigger than any of us. You have something to bring to the table, bring it to the table. Let's test it. But none of us have the answers. If we had the answers, we'd be free. We would need this. This program would be asinine. For what? What are we doing this for? We thank you all for joining us tonight. We're going to have a roundtable discussion. We're going to bring our brother Rakeem back on. I suppose we'll be taking questions from the chat. Thank you all. Hopefully you can share this, like it, support us. Black Power Media is 100% independent, Black owned and operated. We want to get off YouTube. We want to build our own networks and situations. So make sure you support. If you enjoy what it is we're bringing to the table, support what it is we're doing. Support our efforts. None of us are getting paid. There's no donors. No white folks are giving us any money. But everybody can't say that. Everybody can't say that. In fact, some people can't say anything because of the fact that they're corporate sponsored. And I'm not even talking about the Roland Martins. I'm not talking about any of those folks. I'm talking about a lot of these platforms that call themselves liberation circles. They profit off our people suffering because you have wealthy white folks who back them. In fact, it's safe to say, and some of y'all are not going to like this, but so what? There are more corporate sponsored revolutionary organizations out here than not. When you rely on government funding for your revolution, that's a hell of a revolution. When you rely on state sponsorship, when you have certain foundations that you get your money from, then how the hell can you fight capitalism? How the hell can you fight colonialism? I'm confused about that. Like Malcolm said, that's like going to Jesse James to complain about Frank James. So we're gonna take it back to this roundtable. Again, we thank you all for coming out.
Peace, peace. Thank you, Brother Kalonji. Powerful, powerful. I'd also like to say peace to Brother Shep in the chat and Jalil Mutakin. As Brother Kalonji echoed, we are our own liberators. We just have to understand what we are striving to be liberated from. One thing that I wanted to kind of just say to the chat and everybody watching, we're using these words insurgency and revolution and counterinsurgency. And I just kind of wanted to put out there that the person, David Galula, who wrote the book, Counterinsurgency Warfare Theory and Practice, he basically described insurgency essentially as a civil war, a revolutionary war. Insurgents, which would be us, seeking to have agency over ourselves, power over ourselves, community, and counterinsurgency are the forces that are striving to maintain power. I think that's important for everyone to understand whenever they hear these words, because these words, such as insurgency, can be used against us here in America. They can be used against our brothers and sisters in West Africa. They can be used, our brothers and sisters in Haiti. It can be used against our brothers and sisters in Palestine, right? All of this is connected. And a lot of these tactics that are used internationally are also used domestically. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there because these are just words that are being pulled out of the air. This is literally a war being waged against us, right? And we are the insurgents. We are the ones who the counterinsurgents are striving to maintain power over, right? So I just need everybody to understand that. And so thank you for everybody, Kiana Jones Moore, uh, Dr. Joy James, Dr. Clay-Gilmore, Dr. Miron Clay-Gilmore, Brother Kalonji, for those powerful bills and presentations. And so while you guys were building, I was cooking up some questions for you guys. And some of these questions might be specific to some of you, but I want everybody to feel free to add on. If I ask, let's say, Kiana a question, and after she gets through building, if you want to answer that question as well, please do not hesitate to add on. That's how we all come to an understanding, our knowledge and our wisdom borns that. And so, Kiana, I wanted to ask you a question. All right, being in Atlanta, all right, and we look at Cop City, and we look at Atlanta being a majority Black town with a lot of Black elected officials, right? How does the backing of Cop City by certain Black elected officials challenge a lot of maybe liberal understandings of Black political representation?
I don't know that it really challenges what a lot of people honestly believe if we're talking about liberals, because they would expect for their elected officials to fall in line with law enforcement. They got to back the blue, right?
Right.
Police foundations, if people don't know, are not foundations that are created for the benefit of police officers. Police foundations are run and comprised of the heads of corporate companies, Fortune 500 companies here in Atlanta, like Coca-Cola, Home Depot, Delta. The heads of these corporations are a part of the Atlanta Police Foundation. But police foundations put a lot of money into politics, as do police unions. I was at a city council meeting once, and I called out a city council member for something that I felt was like really disrespectful to some families of children who had been murdered by police. And when I spoke to them offline, I said, what you did was real jacked up. Like, it was like a slap in their faces. How could you do this? And she said to me, why did you call me out in the public like that? Like, now the police chief's going to be all over me. These people are so afraid of law enforcement authoritative figures that they fall in line with the police. So when I think about people who are in positions of authority, Black people in particular, here in the city of Atlanta, and let's take, in my previous example, I talked about the NAACP. You have the NAACP that is run on the state level by a Black lawyer who is the civil rights attorney, allegedly. You have the ACLU of Georgia that is run by one of Andrew Young's daughters. These people never spoke up against Cop City until it became an electoral issue. And even then, the ACLU still did not speak up against Cop City. They literally spoke to the referendum and the voter suppression tactics of Mayor Andre Dickens. The NAACP was not coming out against Cop City until there were talks of a referendum. All of these organizations that have Black faces, and then the Black faces in high places legislatively, work in tandem to keep the people subdued. So honestly, it's not a contradiction as to what most Black liberals think here in Atlanta. Things are going swimmingly because this is what they do. You have to remember that Julian Bond's son is on the Atlanta City Council. He ain't no different than his daddy. You have people who are legacy members of the Black misleadership class who sit in these places of authority. So it's no different than what I would expect. But those on the outside looking in would say, for Atlanta to be the Black Mecca. And I think that they would be looking from the lens of revolutionary action that has occurred in Atlanta when they think about 2020 and all those days that people were in the streets protesting and how people showed up after the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, Ahmaud Arbery. People would think that that is representative of the culture here at large, but it's really not. Most of these are go along to get along Negroes who ain't trying to do nothing revolutionary.
Indeed, indeed. Does anybody else want to add on, or we can get to the next question? All right, Dr. Clay-Gilmore, I have a question for you, brother. How does internal colonialism theory help us understand the deployment of counterinsurgency tactics such as militarized policing, surveillance, and political repression against Black and Brown communities as efforts to maintain control over internal colonies within the United Nations state?
Yeah, man, I think this actually relates to the last topic y'all was talking about too, because when I was talking about the accomplishment that the United States did in the 20th century by coining counterinsurgency, they also evolved the way they manage non-Western populations by stratifying them and creating managerial classes among them. So you see this in Africa when it decolonizes, right? An African urban bourgeoisie emerges in capital centers to help the neo-colonial power extract more resources, right? This is what Nkrumah is talking about, that process of extraction. And internal colonialism can show you how that happened here. And in many ways it happens with our culture, but it also happens economically through the free labor we're forced to give, through the prison system, through the capitalist economic system, right? And you have a certain Black class. I mean, in his analysis, Robert Allen called it the MBA class, right? But they occupy positions that formerly white functionaries would fill only during Jim Crow. And this is what's so masterful about the U.S.'s ability and mastery of counterinsurgency during this time is that it intentionally kills Jim Crow. Right? It killed Jim Crow on purpose. When you read the COINTELPRO files, there's a really good historian, got a book on this called Racial Matters. And he talks about how the FBI intentionally killed Jim Crow while installing a new mass surveillance system on Black people. We talk about COINTELPRO, but you also have what's called the ghetto listening post, right? Where snitches were placed throughout the Black community, just so the FBI can have a feel on how these people think. Right. And so that's an internal colonialism. That's like one mechanism that's used around the world when you have these functionaries being placed, for the purpose of intelligence collection,
Indeed. Indeed. Thank you, brother. Dr. Joy James, I wanted to ask you, how might we understand Cop City as a kind of domestic counterinsurgency training ground, not just for police militarization, but for controlling uprisings in historically oppressed communities?
Yeah, I think I could echo some of what Kiana had put on the table and others. The way I see it, you have a convergence between the domestic warfare and international warfare. The U.S. appears to be streamlining, right? And so in our conversations that we've had in the past, or in the writings, the contributions from Kalonji and Kiana for both books on Cop Cities, this, domestic policing is already militarized. And so what I was trying to talk about, like the long lens from 88, is that it's perpetual war, as we know, but the war is going to increasingly look like an occupation. So it's as Kalonji said, we would have to organize collectively and also really let go of our sense of territorial control. It's a war machine. I don't even see it as policing. I mean, the thing with Eric Adams in New York, right? So easily bought. I understand he had felonies, facing him, whatever, but he was already corrupt as an NYPD cop and leader. And then his following the POTUS is about cutting deals. So many of our folks are cutting deals. That means I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else, right? But, stability, deference to the police, deference to the local police, apparatus, which is really the city council sometimes, or the mayor. So when people have said earlier that this is war, I think we have to think of it within the framework of war. And, the difference between the CIA and the FBI is the CIA has more money and they have more passports. But it's still the same. It's the same corporation. So the local police, the state police, the National Guard, the Navy SEALs, all these different factions, I think the POTUS is going to streamline. Right. One, because it's really it's basically just stealing what's left of the state and then turning it over to billionaires and disposing of what they consider to be, quote, expendable people, which is us and others. So everything, it's kind of like George Jackson said, the definition of law is fascism. And like 50 years ago, you're like, you sure? But like, go ahead, 2025. I mean, the POTUS made it clear. And so I want to repeat what I said earlier. Who are homegrown criminals? And why do you think you would be able to deport them to a terror prison in El Salvador? You already gave them $6 million, which is pennies for the US, right? So they're buying gulags. And then Eric Prince, former Navy SEAL, who is a mercenary now. I mean, there's different ways to go in the military and come out with more money. Is like, well, yeah, maybe we could build private prisons. It's sort of like our sci-fi in the future is here in the moment. And I don't think local government, city government, state government, I don't think any of that matters anymore. If like ICE can just, because they cut a deal with Eric Adams, he's letting ICE come, everywhere in New York City, and New York City is a sanctuary city. So that's not even a real thing. This is like Alice in Wonderland.
Wow, indeed. Brother Kalonji, in what ways does the criminalization of Black people in America function as a form of counterinsurgency? And how does the Cop City project embody this logic through the expansion of jail, prison, the carceral infrastructure, and state violence?
I mean, it is, I guess I'll start off with a Tupac quote. He said, every nigga lives on death row. You understand what I'm saying? When we talk about how imprisonment, how the kidnapping of Black, brown, and others in the United States works, when you're talking about cop cities, you can't have a real discussion around cop cities without talking about the School of Americas, and as our sister Liliana pointed out in one of our discussions about how they have overthrown a number of different countries and inserted their own dictators, and in many cases, of course, they are disposable, as we've witnessed time and time again. We see Cop City just as we see the police, as the police being the domestic arm or the local arm of the establishment. Cop City, it's not a coincidence that Cop Cities and the School of Americas is in the same state. They're both in the state of Georgia as far as their headquarters. It's not a coincidence that you have Lockheed Martin here in Georgia. It's not a coincidence that Tyler Perry is housed on a former military base. You know, there's no entertainment for the sake of entertainment. You understand? The world is a stage, as they say. How does it relate, or how does it interconnect? It is all about enslavement.
Mhm.
You know, I know that Michelle Alexander talked about the new Jim Crow. There's no new Jim Crow. It's business as usual. The one thing about capitalism, the one thing about imperialism and colonialism, it will morph into whatever you need it to be, whatever looks fashionable, whatever looks cool. You understand what I'm saying? It's not a coincidence that two of the top 5 wealthiest men on the planet happen to own social media outlets, because they know that it is a do-it-yourself fed file. They know that, again, we strive off of the ego. So you're going to tell them everything you're doing. You're going to tell them everywhere you at. And then you have some fools that will say, well, there's nobody doing nothing, and nobody's doing. If you're not there, you don't know. When it comes to our work, our community work, the majority of our work we don't talk about online. Indeed, we know that the internet came from the military. It was a tool that the military utilized first. You know, so when it comes to counterinsurgency, when it comes to policing, of course they need a cop city, because it is a base. When they first start talking about cop cities, I said it was a paramilitary base. And I had some folks saying, well, it's not paramilitary, it's owned by, paramilitary is usually corporations. Who do you think is sponsoring the cop cities? Some of these corporations, from the Home Depots to the Walmarts and Targets and the UPSs and all of that, you know, the Chick-fil-A's, you know, this is what it is. It is about corporate greed. And so the first enslaved people are always going to be us, because we earn for them. You know, so, you know, counterinsurgency, enslavement is hand in hand. This is how this thing go.
Indeed, indeed.
You mind if I follow up
Absolutely.
on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Add on.
Yeah, man. You know, I mean, I really appreciated your comments, Kalonji, and you know, I found this struck out to me when I was doing my research and writing my dissertation on counterinsurgency so much that I had to coin a concept to even encapsulate it. But I mean, you really see an explosion in the criminalization of Black communities and young Black men in the 1960s. Right. And in these, I mean, there was a Kerner Commission report where the executive branch studied the demographics of the rioters. They were 17 to 24-year-old Black men who were unemployed. Right. And there was a national police force created to deal with this population. There were criminologists who did demographic studies to estimate how many Black boys be born in the Black race 20 years from now, to estimate the prison rates. There was, I mean, the head director of HUD under Carter was calling the Black community an inner enemy and talking about the Vietnamization of America through the ghetto, right? So you see this trend emerge. I mean, we talk about the extension of slavery during Jim Crow, but I mean, you find that the rates of imprisonment for Black men doubled after Jim Crow. Right. And this is the paradoxical nature of counterinsurgency. What you see, I mean, there's a really good Black historian, Elizabeth Hinton, talks about this, but what she shows you is that the Voting Rights Act was also passed with the creation of a national police force in the United States for the first time through the LEAA. Right. That's the type of framework we're caught in, where you're given strategies of assimilation and self-determination, but it's from a Western framework. And the people who don't fit in this framework, right, those people get the big stick. They don't get the carrot.
Mm.
That type of social engineering and criminalization is how Black people are managed here. But abroad, it's just terrorism.
Right. Wow. And would that be a form of pacification?
Absolutely, right? Pacification is when you can apply strategic force. I mean, look, one of the writers of the U.S.'s modern professional manual that set the standards on this stuff in post 9/11. I mean, he called counterinsurgency armed social work.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Right? I mean, this is not Saving Private Ryan type war fighting.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
these people build clinics, they offer healthcare services, and they kill.
Wow.
Right? Police play basketball with you sometimes. They at your kid's school, and they'll kill you if you call them at the wrong time and happen to say the wrong thing in your house. Right? It's that multifaceted,
And they kill through the clinics and healthcare systems that they create.
Absolutely. That's a living death in and of itself. It's nothing pretty about assimilation. No. Right? That's not pretty. You know what I mean?
Kiana, I wanted to ask you something. So when we look at Cop City and we also look at the history of different police departments in America working with militaries like the IDF and cross-training each other, can you just shed some light on that? Because I don't think that a lot of people even know much about that. Because I think it's very telling that, we see on the news, obviously, what's happening in Gaza, or if we're on Twitter, we probably see more of it. And we see these IDF soldiers who are responsible for this genocide, right? But whenever we look at police departments in America, we're not trained to see them as perpetrators of genocide domestically. But these two groups are training together, right? If you can just talk about some of that. You're muted. You're on mute right now.
Look at me. I just got started and didn't even realize. I was starting off by saying that deadly exchange programs are a thing. So I've participated in panels at Netroots for the past 2 years, and both of those panels have been about deadly exchange programs, how it is that Cop Cities come into being, the deadly exchange programs that feed into the sustainability of Cop Cities, and how they proliferate throughout the country. Deadly exchange programs are programs like the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange that take law enforcement executives from in this country to places like Israel that have very poor records on human rights, countries that don't believe in a such thing as human rights. They will violate you. As we see, those countries host U.S. military and law enforcement officials and train them in the counterinsurgency tactics that they use, whether that's surveillance, whether that's hand-to-hand combat, whether that is kettling techniques and other tactics that are used to quash protests. We're learning this from abroad. There is a constant importing and exporting of violence. And what we see is that officers are trained to exact this violence on Black communities, poor white communities, and particularly against protesters. So when we talk about the way Atlanta is linked to Gaza, it is because, again, the idea that Atlanta is surveilled the way it is came from Little Gaza. Little Gaza is a place that exists that is the model for Cop City. It's because the Israelis have a Little Gaza to train and practice how they murder Palestinians. The use of sexual violence. Y'all heard of the Brave Cave? The Rainbow House around here in Clayton County? And saying that can probably really get me hurt, or attempted to, because they don't want us to know that there's an entire house in Clayton County where law enforcement is trafficking and sexually abusing minors. Wow. They don't want that to be known. The Brave Cave, other incidences in places throughout the South, the incident where these officers burst into a house and beat Black men just because they were in the house with white women. Like the types of things that we see are things that happen in other places. I'm sure people remember months ago when it was revealed that there were Israelis who were protesting in the streets because the Israeli military was told to stop sexually assaulting people who were their captives, right? Their prisoners. And let's be honest about it. Israelis capture Palestinians who are innocent and they are prisoners. Palestinians have Israeli hostages. Just think about the weaponization of the language, even the word terrorism, how terrorists came to be defined in the United States, first being used even against Palestinians, and how we continue to criminalize and go and augment these terms to include other groups, Black people, protesters, Muslims, anybody who does not fall in line with white male heteronormativity and Christian nationalism, right? But when we think about Cop cities, these deadly exchange programs play a huge part because these are the tactics that they will train in at Cop City. We already know that the Israeli occupation forces are going to be here training others. We already know that even DeKalb County Police is in the midst of talks to train at Cop City. They have people coming from outside of the state of Georgia to train at Cop City in these tactics that are used by the Israelis and other militaries that have poor human rights records, that don't care about abusing people, that don't care about murdering and torturing people for no reason. This is the state that we're in, and people have to understand that Cop City is more than a term. Like, this is terror.
Indeed. And what I would like for people to understand with your excellent breakdown is how in the beginning of this roundtable, we talked about what insurgency is, what counterinsurgency is. So we see the connection between the police departments in America and like IDF soldiers. We also see the connection in who they view as insurgent groups when during the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor protests, it was Palestinians on Twitter who were tweeting Black protesters, telling them how to avoid tear gas and what to do in these certain situations. I just kind of wanted to also paint that overall picture as well. Dr. Miron Gilmore, you kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I think it's extremely important, especially when we begin to, tie in different things like Huey Newton's theory of intercommunalism. And as we know, technology is something, it's like Pandora's box. Once it's out there, there's no putting it back in. What role does surveillance technology play in reproducing the logic of counterinsurgency within the US cities? And how does it specifically target Black and Brown organizing as insurgent activity? Or not even just Black and Brown organizing, Black and Brown people and doing whatever, barbecuing, right, as insurgent activity?
Yeah, I think it plays a huge part, right? So, I mean, going back to what I was saying about the ghetto listening posts, I think since the installation of the ghetto listening posts, which you see from the executive branch through its funding and militarization of local police departments consistently, and basically intensifying after 9/11, is the incorporation of mass surveillance techniques into the mainstream of governance mechanisms toward the Black population. That's just on a national level. I mean, you even have biometric forms of technological surveillance, right? So when you look at the US DNA data banks, most of them are Black males who are incarcerated. It's like 77% of all the DNA in the US data banks, right? You have all sorts of ways, from cameras to driver's licenses, and technology is only making this more ubiquitous, right? So, Kalonji mentioned it earlier, but I think it's important to note that the internet itself is a product and proof of the success of the U.S.'s mastery of counterinsurgency, right? Computing technologies in the first AI laboratories were actually funded from the Pentagon as an extension of Project Agile, through the office of DARPA. And it was also formulated as an extension of what was called the Cambridge Project, also known as Project Camelot. And what this goal of this machine was to integrate all sorts of open source feed information, right? Today, what that looks like is the IQ system. It's basically a human radar system that was completed by the United States in 2008, right? And what it does is take Facebook posts, news, prices of items to figure out how to predict catastrophe, how to predict insurgency, right? And this has been a long-range aspiration in the United States for some time. But when it comes to Black people, I think what you're seeing is just a broader mechanism of mass surveillance. So the prison is one type of surveillance, right, of people who could be a direct threat to the system. And then you have open forms of mass surveillance, like Malcolm said, right? America means prison, right? So you see all these forms of open air surveillance. And I think that, and risk of that being intensified at any time, given all this mass criminalization effect, that the men of the group are so dehumanized, the entire group is subject to genocidal conditions as a result, right? That's a classic case of genocide,
Right, and it's very. We have been socialized to not see our own genocide as a genocide, right? And I think that is one of the effects of the counterinsurgency warfare that has been placed upon us, right? We have lost what the actual cause is in a lot of cases. Dr. Joy James, I wanted to ask you, how does the increasing criminalization of dissent on college campuses through policing, surveillance, disciplinary action, as we see students, professors have been, threatened with deportation. Some students have been threatened. I believe at Columbia they were threatened to take away degrees. I don't even know how that is possible. But how do these things reflect a broader strategy to suppress political consciousness and activism among young people, particularly around issues of racial justice, environmental justice, genocide, and abolition?
Yeah, I think after the confrontation, or the attempt to free people by Hamas and what has lasted over a year, the state has used a red herring of anti-Semitism to promote a virtue that it does not have, and to use it as a cover to begin, military or militarized strategies for disappearing people. So the first would be the students who organized to stop a genocide in Palestine. And, there's at least one that I know, Mamadou, who is at Cornell. He made it back. I believe his citizenship is Gambia and Britain. So he made it out. He's one of the few that just openly levied a lawsuit against Trump. And it was clear that none of these lawsuits were going to prevail because the state keeps moving the marker. So, to tie to what people have said before, we're overly incarcerated Palestinians and people of color who support liberation movements or just basic human decency, civil rights, human rights. They're overly targeted. Rubio, Secretary of State, has deported, gleefully has announced, over 300 graduate students out of the country. So it's a lawless era, and it seems like it's going to ramp it up as hyper violent. And I guess this brings me back to Sherlyn Ifill, who used to be at the NAACP. I'm going to keep saying this. There's concern about the homegrown criminals that POTUS is talking about. because now you're talking about not just being caged, but you're talking about being caged in another country. I mean, that's why I sort of started with Obama. You can be assassinated here in US, but you can be assassinated in Yemen. You can be set, the precedent has been always been set with us in terms of mass death, torture, disappearance, and rape. But now it's setting, the legal precedent has been set. And so academia largely caved. They started with IVs. Columbia caved first. It was, I believe, 200, 400 mil, but they're multi-billion-dollar players, particularly because they took a lot of real estate out of Harlem and put it in their portfolio. So Columbia University is wealthy just by the land that they accumulated that used to belong, the brownstones of people's grandmothers and uncles and aunties and stuff like that. Harvard has sensed that it won't cave, and they were hit with a multi-billion-dollar penalty by the state, but then they hired Republican attorneys who had worked with Trump. So there is a schism inside the reactionary sector about how far Trump can go in terms of dictatorship. It's not even cosplay, like really trying to pull it together. I think most of academia is going to hide unless the students engage in another round of protests. But the Columbia students were harmed by the NYPD, but my understanding is that the students who were at City College in Harlem were more working class, more people of color. The NYPD broke their teeth. So there's a difference between students, it's something that is not talked about in terms of the class issue. Like the Ivies can, they will expel people. And as was pointed out, by the professor, yeah, and they did take their degrees back, including graduate degrees, which again, it's like, how is that even legal? It doesn't matter. What is legal is whatever they can make happen. So I'm really curious. This is a weird, wonky question, but I don't care. I come from a military family. I'm really curious about what kind of language could we engage in with Black people who are in the military. There's something like 28, 29% of Black women are in the military. Something like 16% of Black men are in the military, right? And there's this whole banning of trans and non-binary. So that's in another lane. But the organizing in my mind, it may be like more of a wishful fantasy, would have to be the people who are already embedded in the state and who might be able to flip. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Whenever makes me think of Robert F. Williams, who is a former Marine. There are definitely revolutionaries who have been in the military and have come out and came back home and taught those skills to the community. And so I definitely understand. Brother Kalonji, I wanted to ask you. When we think about, and you mentioned J. Edgar Hoover. And when we think about the history of J. Edgar Hoover, COINTELPRO, dating all the way back to Marcus Garvey and the UNIA, down to Black Panther Party, the SNCC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Black Liberation Army, they were obviously not only trying to destroy the threat of a Black Messiah, but they were attempting to make resistance not even a viable option to the community by us seeing what they have done to our people who have had the strength to fight against the powers that be. Again, you work with, as far as a lot of political prisoners, free all of our political prisoners. When we look at COINTELPRO past, to counterinsurgency now. And when we look at organizing, I remember I had spoken with Mae Jackson from SNCC, and she told me that they didn't have a name then for COINTELPRO, but they knew something was going on. And it caused a lot of paranoia within SNCC. And I would guess that in different revolutionary organizations, it had the same effect. What lessons do we take from that, knowing that we have increased surveillance on us now, we have, more militarization of the police? As far as our organizing, what lessons do we learn from the past that we can bring with us to the present to be more effective organizers uh, in hopes to liberate our people from this oppressive system?
I think for us with organizations organized with particularly the FTP movement, one of the things that the CIFO movement at large, one of the things that we attempt to do is build small cadres and know who we're dealing with. The folks I organize with, we're at, each other's children's graduations, where, someone's giving birth, we're there. You know what I mean? Your child graduates from preschool, we all screaming in the audience like he just got a PhD. You know what I'm saying? And, so the thing is, I think that one of the mistakes that have been made, past and present, is folks want to build this fantasy mass organization or mass mobilization. I think that people talk about there being power in numbers. As a Muslim, I would quote the Prophet Muhammad when he said that if you got 10 people that's down, you got more than most. If you have 10 people that are all the way down, that going to roll with you through thick and thin, who are going to be able to criticize you when you're wrong, constructive criticism when you're wrong, stand by you and keep this thing moving. If you got 10, then you have more than most. Most organizations and most organizers don't have 10 tried and true comrades. They could bullshit you. I'm just telling you, this must be properly understood, man. They can bullshit you. And they can make it look like, the Black Panther Party had 5,000 members. The Black Panther Party didn't have 5,000 active members. We can build this whole fantasy thing, and we can act like, we can live off the past. You have so many people right now trying to remix the 60s. The beautiful thing about the folks I learned from it, and many people, depending on when you met me, you might be confused and thinking the first person you met me with was the first time I was politicized, right? But I've been organizing now. This is going on my 40th year. And I've learned from some of the baddest that did it. That's facts. And I'm saying that not on no bragging tip. I'm saying it because of the fact that I picked up jewels, both good and bad. And you have to have the power of discernment. You have to understand what you're dealing with. You can't get caught up on, who got the loudest mouth, or who looked the toughest, or who got the most props and all that type of stuff. You understand what I'm saying? There are plenty of organizations. There are organizations right now that most people don't know exist. There are folks who train. We are heavy on urban survival and preparedness. It's one of the things we are hardcore about. We're about institution building. You know what I mean? So the thing is, the proof is in the put in. It's what you doing, not what you saying. There's a whole lot of good rappers out there, and folks are trying to just recruit. And in many cases, you're recruiting more police agencies than a little bit. Folks talk about the FBI and they talk about counterinsurgency, and they talk about the CIA, but there are over 1,000 different police forces. I'm not talking about police departments, but different forces from the Bureau of Indian Affairs on down to the military itself. There's different police units that exist. There are probably a few on this platform right now watching this program. So what? Go tell your superiors, fuck you. You know what I'm saying? Not a no tough talk. I'm just saying it's like we're on this planet for a limited amount of time. And again, it's not about acting tough. It's not about murder mouthing. It's not about doing a tight buy and all that with your Twitter fingers. None of that matters. It's not about how many followers you have on YouTube. It's not about what degrees you have, because as Joy pointed out a few minutes ago, these motherfuckers will take your degrees back. So as brilliant as you are, say the wrong thing, your PhD, your MBA, your JD, all that shit could go down the toilet. Toilet paper. So the thing is, counterinsurgency is at an all-time high. Again, dealing with a lot of different OGs and veterans, and sometimes I gotta hang up on some of my comrades because some of the stuff they say on the phone, I'm like, dude, like, are you out your mind right now? And the thing is, we have to look at what folks have to lose. What do they have? There's plenty of stories about agents who joined different formations, husbands and wives, men who came in and got women pregnant, in the movement that was feds, police. You had the boss unit out of New York who, what's his name? Gene Roberts, I believe, who was Malcolm's bodyguard, but also he was running with the Black Panther Party in New York. So the thing is, we have to acknowledge that counterinsurgency still exists. And until we get that through our heads, because of the fact that we talk about it so much that it's taken the bite out of it. When you talk about I get people all the time, I think they listening to my phone call. Your phone is plugged into the state. They don't have to tap your shit. Your shit's already tapped. Some folks get comfortable, well, I'm speaking through Signal, I'm speaking through that. Listen, whatever these motherfuckers created, they can crack. They built it. You don't think it's a back door to it? So again, we have to look at this thing for what it is. If we love ourselves and we truly love our people, we have to move like it. We got to act like it. We have to treat this thing like you're at home and you know that there are criminals surrounding your house daily. You got to feel like it's some gunners outside waiting to blast your ass. You know what I'm saying? You have to move as if your life depends on it. And if you're not moving like that, then you playing revolution. Fuck your honorarium, your books, all that. No one cares. I haven't seen a book yet that can defeat these motherfuckers. You understand what I'm saying? You have to train physically, mentally, and spiritually. You have to choose your comrades like you choosing your mate, your husband or your wife. Now, if you just marry anything, then that's different. But you got to choose this like your children's lives depend on it, because it's very real situation. It's very real thing that at any moment, any of us can become political prisoners. They haven't shut the doors on that. Anyone can be assassinated. Hell, you saw these motherfuckers murdering folks through their cell phones, through their pagers, through WhatsApp. So I think that once we stop playing revolution, then we'll get it together. We'll get on the right side of the barricades, and we'll think and we'll move as if we not only love ourselves, we got to do this thing like, like whoever in your life that you love, that's how you got to treat this thing, like you're protecting them, like you're protecting your daughter from some wolves.
Indeed, indeed. I would like to say, thank you to all of our presenters, Kiana Jones Moore, Kalonji Changa, Dr. Clay-Gilmore, Dr. Joy James. Very powerful people, very powerful voices in our movement. If you are just now getting familiar with these spaces, I want you to take the time to look these people up, look our panelists up, get their works, buy their books, watch their interviews, listen to their radio shows. It's important to stay tapped in. One of the things about counterinsurgency, again, that the person that wrote the manual on counterinsurgency said is the goal of the counterinsurgent and the goal of the insurgent is to win over the population, right? The population is one of the battlefields. And through all sorts of propaganda, commercials and ads on consumerism and American exceptionalism, American nationalism being pushed in our faces, product placement in everything that we watch. I looked it up recently, and we're probably. I looked it up recently, and it was research done on how much ads we are exposed to in America daily, from social media to radio to music, because there is product placement in music, and we do it for free in a lot of cases. Movies, it's around 4,000 to 10,000 ads that we are bombarded with on a daily basis. This is all to socialize us into having ideas of American exceptionalism, normalizing American nationalism, just putting a black face on it, black capitalism, black American nationalism, things that promote our own destruction and oppression. And so what we are striving to do here at Black Power Media is to counter the counterinsurgency with our own propaganda, because propaganda isn't necessarily a bad thing. All people use it. Ours is based in truth. Ours is based in our history. Ours is based in our politics. Ours is based on the vision that we have for ourselves and community and where we want to go. The end result and the end goal is to have agency over ourselves, to have agency over our community, and get this white man's boot off of our neck, right? And so again, I want everyone, especially if you are new to these spaces, to make sure you dive into the works of Kalonji Changa, of Kiana Jones Moore, of Dr. Joy James, of Dr. Clay-Gilmore, because it's powerful. You have to politicize. You have to become politicized. You have to become radicalized. You can't go and continue to fall for the narratives that are constantly pushed on us on a daily basis. As I stated, we are bombarded with 4,000 and 10,000 ads promoting our own destruction a day. Now, I don't care who you are. If you are not aware of these type of things, you too can be socialized, right? You can be socialized to put these European ideals in the black face and then call them your own. And I see that happening in real time. So again, I would like to say thank you, not just for their presentations on this panel today, But thank you for the work, boots on the ground work, for the work in academia, for the work that you guys do all around, because you guys are extremely important to our movement. Knowledge is the foundation of all things in existence, and we first have to have the knowledge to know exactly what's going on in our communities, the forms and systems of oppression and how they work. I think a lot of times we get sidetracked as to think that this is just the thing where we are Black folks and white folks dislike us. When these systems that they created are extremely diabolical and can be extremely complex, and it's really in our favor to break them down and understand exactly how they work. So before we wrap things up, I just want to ask the panelists, again, I do thank you guys for everything that you do. Do you guys have any closing remarks?
Very appreciative for the consideration, time, and opportunity to be here, and very thankful for everyone who's joined.
Yeah, I definitely want to make a couple of announcements. One, we have a few different things coming up on the platform. First of all, let me start by saying thank you to all of you for the powerful words and for joining us today. We respect everyone's time. We know that you could be anywhere in the world, but you was here with us today. This weekend, we have we're honored to rebroadcast. There was a London's People Tribunal on police violence. And in fact, Dr. Joy James was one of the presenters, along with Mariel Fanon, Frantz Fanon's daughter, and others. Here on Black Power Media, we have Migrant Media, who covered that particular tribunal. It was a 2-day piece, and Dr. Joy could talk more about it. But we'll be broadcasting it here on this platform on Black Power Media Reloaded, Saturday, April 19th at 4 p.m. EST, and Sunday, April 20th at 10 a.m. EST. And I know that they are 6 and 7 hour programs, so make sure you tap in. It will begin, like I said, this Saturday at 4 p.m. and this Sunday at 10 a.m. EST. So make sure, like I said, if if you're interested in checking that out, I think it's, from what I saw, it's very informative and a very powerful piece. We have a couple new shows coming up. Charles Barron and Inez Barron, they will actually have a show on this platform kicking off on Mumia's birthday, which is April 24th. So they will have a show once a month here on this platform. Make sure you tune in, 7 p.m. EST. You can check out Charles Barron and Inez Barron. For those of you in New York, you already know what time it is. Brother Charles has been on the platform several different times. One of my favorite politicians and veteran Panthers. So we're happy to have their show on the platform. We have a number of other different shows coming up. We have on May 1st, on May Day, we will have as our guests, May 1st at noon, we will have Cornel West and Nina Turner joining us. So make sure you check out that particular episode, Cornel West and Nina Turner, on May 1st at noon, right here on Black Power Media. And we have a number of other different shows. Of course, we have Guerrilla Intellectual University with Dr. Joy James. We have Amandala with
Dr. Gerald Horn.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Gerald Horn, Boona, and others. We have the Rise Up International Morning Show, where you can catch Rakeem, Kiana, myself on occasion, Ikemba, Natasha, Isaac, and Boona on the Rise Up International Morning Show. And Fernando. How am I forget Fernando? I'm slipping. Y'all supposed to be helping me. But and we're looking for more hosts. We're looking for more shows. So if you're interested, you can email us at mediablackpower@gmail.com, mediablackpower@gmail.com. As I mentioned earlier as well, join our email list, blackpowermedia.org. blackpowermedia.org. And as my uncle used to say, help us stay here. Help us stay here. Put something in the bucket. Help us stay here. Anyway, I'm gonna pass the mic. We definitely appreciate you all for joining us for this particular piece, and we hope that it was informative in some way, fashion, or form.
Indeed. Brother Dr. Clay-Gilmore, would you like to close it out as well?
Yeah, I'm just extremely grateful for the opportunity to, share audience with you all and collaborate with you all. And, I'll just end with a type of provocation I tried to start with, and that's, what do we as Black people see as victory? We have to work that out as a people. What does victory look like for us? Because our enemies come up with victory plans, and we don't have any. Our enemies create institutions and networks to figure out a vision for peace and victory, and we don't have one right now. So, outside of that, and given our strategic location as a people within an empire ran by a group that has killed entire races historically, the philosophical question I always ask people is, look, what do we expect from a revolt? And are we okay with being, as Huey P. Newton described, a Black revolutionary, as a doomed person?
Indeed. Dr. Joy James?
Yeah, my gratitude to everyone here, everyone who took time to share and, think collectively, and everyone who took time to, listen in community and digest, and also certainly, share your own thoughts. Like for mine, as we close the day, it's really how we want to wage war resistance and dismantle carceral sites, and how we could, through intergenerational and international alliances, basically work the program that we already know needs to be leveraged out there. And people are doing it in different ways. But as Kalonji pointed out earlier, there's a lot of friction and a lot of fractionation. And of course, support and defend the political prisoners, particularly since they're creating new political prisoners to go in, and will increasingly expand that kind of capture. I believe we have the capacity, we have the intellect, but to echo everyone else, it's a level of engagement and also dealing with our emotional and cognitive issues, conflicts, and fears. But we have people who've shown us how to do war resistance, and so we'll continue to study and practice. So thank you all.
Indeed. And before we go, I would also like to shout out the Rise Up International Morning Show family with Kiana Jones Moore, Ikemba, Fernando, Natasha, Isaac. Make sure y'all check us out in the mornings. And Brother Kalonji, make sure y'all check us out in the mornings. It's just be in community with us. And again, check out this Black Power Media on YouTube, Black Power Media Reloaded, Patreon, blackpowermedia.org, and just continue to support. We appreciate you all. Free all political prisoners, free the land, and Black Power. We out. Peace.
Peace.
Ancestor, take my hand. Ancestor, lead me on. Ancestor, let me stand. Ancestor, I get tired. Ancestor, I get weak. God knows I get warm. Ancestor, through the storm. Ancestor, through the night. Ancestor, lead me on. Ancestor, through the light. Ancestor, take my hand. Ancestors and me. rosary. Ancestors, please linger near when my life is almost gone. Hear my cry, hear my call. Take my hand, let's start.